Please welcome to the stage Executive Director of Events and Global Programming at the Milken Institute, Conrad Kiechel.
We got more bounce in California than all y'all combined. We got more bounce in California.
Hello. Welcome to what promises to be one of the greatest sessions of Global Conference, and welcome to sunny California. I'm happy to be able to say that today. It's wonderful to have you here with us at the 26th Milken Institute Global Conference. It's always and already been a packed day of insights and exchanges, with more on the way. Over the next 3 days, from now until Wednesday, we have 130 public sessions and more than 900 speakers. And I encourage you to stay for the entire experience, and definitely not to miss the closing concert with Diana Ross on Wednesday afternoon. Remember that every session is live streamed and stays on our website afterwards. And so if you miss a session, and with 130 sessions, you're probably going to miss a session, you can catch it later on our website. As ever, we suggest that you seek out sessions that are off your beaten path to sample ideas and issue areas that you don't routinely encounter, and to see the world through another's eyes. We'll have the opportunity to do just that in a few minutes with the session you're here for, a conversation with John Legend and others on the path to reentry after incarceration. But first, as an official invocation, we're honored and beyond delighted to welcome Karen Bass. Mayor Bass is a true leader and pioneer, and I'm going to skip the rest of my introductory honorifics so she can get up here and give you her remarks. Thank you, Mayor Bass. Please join me in welcoming her.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, Conrad, for that introduction. And I just want to welcome everyone to Los Angeles. Those of you who are not here, welcome to our great city. We are very fortunate that the Milken Institute is our neighbor in Santa Monica, and it is inspiring to be here, surrounded by innovators and thought leaders in finance, government, health, academia, and philanthropy, by people from across the globe. So thank you to the Milken Institute for holding the conference here again. Looking ahead, LA is gearing up for some major events. We're hosting the US Open next month. This morning I was there for the kickoff, the press conference leading up to the Open. I think we're about 46 days away, and it is the first time in 75 years that the world and the nation's best golfers will be coming to town. In 2026, we're hosting the World Cup, and of course everyone knows in 2028 we will be hosting the Summer Olympics and Paralympic Games. So if you landed at LAX, you probably noticed that we are in the midst of a $30 billion capital improvement program that will transform LAX into being a world-class airport for travelers from around the world. So we will always be ready for those events that are coming up around the country, around the world, and we're always happy to welcome the world. We are a city of the world, and about 38% of Angelenos are foreign-born. 5,000 international companies call Los Angeles home, and over the past 5 years, international companies have invested $7.3 billion in new capital projects here. LA attracts people and investment for so many reasons. Of course, our great weather, which didn't start out so great this morning, our innovation and creativity, and our talent. LA has nearly 4,000 venture-backed startups, making this the third largest startup market in the US. We also, of course, stir the soul of the world. We make the movies, the music, the culture that makes us the entertainment and sports capital of the world. And the fact is, we have a lot to be proud of in Los Angeles, but we're also dealing with some profound challenges. So I am the new mayor. I've been mayor for a total of 140 days, and I have been, thank you. Thank you. I have been laser focused on working with Angelenos to build a new Los Angeles, one that is stronger, healthier, happier, and safer, and one that is most important, affordable. So I'll start with the Port of Los Angeles, which is an economic engine in this city. Our port complex is critical. It is a link in the supply chains that connect our countries, And the port in Los Angeles is the #1 port in the Western Hemisphere for 23 straight years. So nearly 30% of all goods imported and exported by sea in the U.S. travel through the ports of LA and Long Beach, containers that stock shelves across America and ship American goods across the world. So I'm also committed to LA continuing to be a leader in sustainability. That's why LA is entering into groundbreaking international partnerships like the Green Shipping Corridors, the pledge that we signed just last week with cities like Shanghai, Singapore, and Tokyo to accelerate the decarbonization of our ports and the ships traveling between our cities. We have the 3rd largest urban economy in the world, and we are committed to creating, recruiting, and growing LA's businesses. Small business in particular are key, and after all, of course, we know that small businesses are responsible for 50% of the jobs, and they are also a critical pathway to upward mobility. Well, for those of you that have been here for any length of time, you've also seen what our challenges are. And our greatest challenge in this city is the fact that LA has become so expensive, it is unaffordable to live here for so many people. And this is a phenomena that we're beginning to see in cities around the country. And this is the reason that we have 47,000 people living in tents all around our city. And if you have driven in LA, you've driven around, you have probably seen tents that are popped up all over the place. So on my first day as mayor, I put the city in a state of emergency because from my point of view, having tens of thousands of people sleeping on the street, 3 to 5 of them don't wake up every morning, they die on those streets, that is an emergency. And it needs to be treated like we would treat a natural disaster. It's a man-made disaster, but it's a disaster nonetheless. So I'm happy to say that in 140 days, we have disproven several myths. One myth is that people who are on the street because they choose to be there, because they want to be there, because they're addicted to drugs, and that's their choice, and that they don't want to leave. Well, in 140 days, we've been able to get 1,200 people out of those tents into motels, and we've not had people turn us down, nor have we had the little encampments that are little communities return in areas where we've been. What this has raised with us, thank you. What this has raised is the need for, in LA, and I believe that many other cities are going to follow because the issue of people being unhoused is a national problem, that we need permanent interim housing. We're building as fast as we can. I issued executive directives right after I was elected to fast-track building, but you can never build fast enough. So while you're building housing, you need some place for people to stay so they don't have to be on the street. And what we're doing now is leasing motels. That economically is not sustainable. So now we need to move into purchasing motels. I know the next panel is going to address what happens when people leave incarceration. And let me just tell you that one of the myths about the character of the people that are on the streets, one category of individuals that are on the streets are people who were incarcerated, they get released, and then no one wants to rent to them. And so they wind up being on the street. We've locked them out of the legal economy because they have been incarcerated, and so then they're stuck. We have thousands of children who are in those tents hiding so that they won't be taken away from their parents. It might be a mother that's fleeing domestic violence. We have teenagers in the foster care system who we essentially kick to the curb after they turn 18. We have veterans who have to make a choice. If you have your veteran benefit, then you make too much money to qualify for veteran housing. And so those are some things that we need to change. So I am really excited, 140 days into my administration, that these are problems that can be solved. But one of the things that we're trying to create in this city is a spirit that everybody has to have skin in the game. We're trying to build a city where we lock arms with each other until we get the job done. And that is the reality of building a new LA. And I truly hope to engage many of you in this effort. If you are from this city, or if you're from another city that is experiencing this problem, we have to understand that we can house in the richest country in the history of the world there is no reason for people to not be able to afford to live inside. We have people in those tents who literally work full-time, but do not make enough money to afford to rent a house. So I am happy to be here with you today. In spite of our problems, Los Angeles is a wonderful city, and we are on our way to creating a new LA that will soon welcome so many parts of the world in our upcoming event. Thank you. Welcome to Los Angeles.
To open the session, please turn your attention to the screens for a trailer of the newly released documentary, Home Free.
After spending 30 years behind bars, you have no medical insurance, you have no place to live, no job. How does one pay the rent if they have no job? How do you buy food if you have no job? Freedom is not the way that I always thought it would be.
1 in 4 Americans today have a record. What happens when people do come home from prison? Are they actually free?
I think that so many people that come home from jails and prisons, they've been told over and over again that their work won't amount to anything.
On top of the low self-worth I had already, I felt like I didn't belong anywhere.
I felt like I was an imposter, and just being in the room wondering, is everyone looking at me? Does everyone know that I'm the one that used to have inmate number 247-384?
Why is it that we always want to continue to break the one that is already broken?
The barriers and walls that keep following people as they return home from prison might be invisible to many, but their harm is profound, and the harms all build on each other. What would it look like if our priorities were redemption, restoration, healing?
We were defined by something that we did once in our past, and that's not fair and that's not right.
We want folks to know that hard work does amount to something. Hard work does amount to them getting hired and, living their best life.
I'm here now, I'm free now, breaking the cycle to see now, no longer cornered, I'm moving forward.
Please welcome the panel on Home Free, a conversation with John Legend on the path to reentry after incarceration, moderated by MSNBC anchor and associate editor at The Washington Post, Jonathan Capehart.
It is afternoon, right?
Afternoon.
I'm still on East Coast time. Thank you all very much for being here. Thank you all for being on the panel. We've got 34 minutes and 49 seconds to have a terrific conversation. Let's start with the personal. Sheena and John, you're both in the movie Home Free that we just saw the trailer of. John, this is personal for you. You say in the movie that, and by the way, Home Free debuts on Prime Video today. Today. Yeah. So you share in the movie that your mother spent time in jail. What difficulties did she endure? Did you and your family endure as a result?
Well, not just my mother. I had cousins, in-laws, neighbors, friends I went to high school with, so many people who found their way in the system one way or another. Mm-hmm. Some of them committed relatively petty, minor offenses, some of them more serious. But what I learned with all of them was that they wanted a chance for redemption. They wanted a chance to contribute to their community. One of the people who brought it up to me first was my sister's baby's father. So my sister had 2 kids with this young man, and he was in some ways harmful to our family. So he wasn't always his best self with my sister and with my nephews. and he got in trouble with the law multiple times. But when he came out, he was still the father of my nephews, and I wanted him to be able to work and be able to take care of them. I wanted him to be able to have legitimate ways to be part of society again, so that he wouldn't get in trouble again, and that he could be a healthy father for my nephews and be a positive contributor to the community. But we put so many barriers in the way of that happening in the name of continuing to punish people after they've already paid their debt to society. So he had served his time, and he wanted to work legitimately. He wanted to participate in society. And if we put up so many barriers for that to happen, what ends up happening is the only avenue left is illegitimate work, illegal work, hustling, whatever it is. And we're making it more likely that people will have recidivism if we close off all the legitimate barriers for them to participate in society and the economy. And the bottom line, we're making it more likely that they won't be good fathers, that they won't be good community members, that they won't be contributing to society in a healthy way. And so what I've decided is that I'm going to make the effort to clear the path for more and more people to rejoin society, give them an opportunity for redemption, and we do that in multiple ways, and one of them is telling stories so that people learn about the real people behind these policies and who they affect.
Right, and a real person. And by the way, I forgot to, and I will introduce the panel as we go along. Y'all know him. This is John Legend. The woman next to him is Sheena Mead. She is the CEO of Clean Slate Initiative. She is also in the movie, and this is personal for you because in the movie, you talk about how stigma prevented you from even being a chaperone on a school trip. For one of your children. Talk more about that. What was that about?
Yeah. So thank you, Jonathan. Thank you for Milken having us and lifting up this important issue in SLAC. I first want to just ground the room because, you know, when we hear about a person who have been arrested or have a conviction, we may go to the most harmful crime or offense that may come. But there are 114 Americans, 1 million Americans, that is 1 in 3 people. Just look around the room, you're in here as well, who have an arrest or a conviction on your record. And I want to just ground people more in the humanity of like the people who are getting like locked up. And I use my story. You know, in 2004, I had 2 cops knock at my door. My children was home and they said, "Mom, the police are at the door." And I went to that door to answer, and the police told me that they was arresting me for bouncing a check for $87.26. That was a worthless check. And that day they handcuffed me in front of my children and took me to jail. And, you know, luckily I came home quickly. You know, I had to pay that check back and borrow more money to pay back the fees I got for being arrested. But my true sentence started that moment. And I thought that was a chapter that was closed because I was no longer allowed to volunteer at my children's school without going through lengthy paperwork or stigma. And I didn't want to stigmatize my children. I could not rent a home where I wanted to live, because it's legal for landlords to discriminate against people with records. And I even faced barriers trying to go to college because I had to check that box and relive why I got arrested. And so, yes, that, you know, there is more than just employment barriers, housing barriers. There's like a humanity barrier there, dignity barrier that people with arrest deal with.
Mm-hmm. And we're going to talk about the barriers in a moment, but another member on our panel here with us is Deepti Rohatgi. She's Executive Director of SLAC for Good. Thank you for being here. So what does your commitment, where does your commitment to help the formerly incarcerated come from?
Sure. So the focus of SLAC for Good is to increase the number of underrepresented individuals in the technology space. And about 7 years ago, SLAC was the fastest growing enterprise startup in the world, ever. We were on top. It was an amazing time to be at SLAC. And for our holiday present at the time, our CEO gave us a copy of the book, Just Mercy by Brian Stevenson, and reminded us that when you are on top, you should never forget about those who are less fortunate. And we all read the book over the holidays, and when we came back, we made a commitment to figure out what we as a company could do to support this often overlooked population of formerly incarcerated individuals. And from that point, we looked at our policies, we looked at our legal records, we looked at how we could hire folks. We actually did our first interview for a candidate in San Quentin prison, and that's where it started. And 5 years later, we are at 17 companies we've scaled to. We've had 47 apprentices in those 17 companies with a 100% success rate. So the talent is there. We just need to give them the opportunity, and that's our commitment.
And when you say 100%, what was the 100%?
Success rate.
Success rate. So
Every single person.
How are you defining success?
Every single person who has gone through our program has received a full-time offer.
And the name of the program is?
The Next Chapter program. Thank you, John. He's better at this than I am.
So let's talk about the barriers. And it's a great segue that you mentioned Just Mercy by Brian Stevenson. He is the founder of the Equal Justice Initiative, known for not only that, but getting people out of prison who were wrongfully convicted. One of those people is the man you saw in the video earlier who was talking about freedom, Anthony Ray Hinton, who served 28 years in jail for a crime he didn't commit. He was released in 2015. And he said two quotes. One you heard him say, which was, "Why do we always want to continue to break the ones who are already broken?" And the other thing he said in the film that also hit me right here was, "We all deserve to come home to freedom." So Sheena, talk more about, because you gave us a little taste of what those barriers are, but you in the movie say that, I think it's you, said that there are 48,000 legal barriers the formerly incarcerated face.
Yes, and I want to keep just reground, and the movie Home Free is based on mostly folks who are formerly incarcerated. Mm-hmm. But something I said earlier, most of these folks are home. Some of them never even been incarcerated. These are people who have been arrested, have convictions on their record, that have never served a day in prison. They're already in our communities, they're already home, and they face the same barriers. And some of those barriers, so there are 94% of employers do background checks. 90% of landlords and 72% of the colleges and universities, making it harder for millions of Americans to get jobs, housing, and access to college. But, going back to those other barriers, you may say, well, a person could pick up a trade. We always like to tell people to go to trade school. Well, in the United States, there are over 44,000 occupational licenses and also certifications that exclude people with arrests and convictions. And I would just give you an example. I travel around the country and I talk to people with lived experience. I was in Oklahoma, and I think they recently made some tweaks to the laws, but this young lady was in prison and she learned the skill set of doing hair, learned cosmetology. She was great at it. She came home and wanted to continue that career because she knew it would be hard for her to get a job, and she could not even get a certification to wash hair. Now, ladies in this room, you know how we are about our hair. And just getting our hair washed is just a simple task, and that's the most relaxing thing. But this woman could not even wash hair unless she go through all these loopholes. And so there's so many barriers. There are brothers that I know have came home to barber, and they were not able to get a license. And there was even back in the early 2000s where they used to do these barbershop raids. They would go back in and then actually arrest people who were cutting hair who did not have a license. These are the type of barriers that people are facing, and it's like, how the hell, can I say that at Milken? How the hell
you did it.
is a person supposed to move ahead with their life when they come home and you're like, they need to get a job, they're not working hard enough, they're not trying hard enough to get housing, they should pull themselves up by the bootstraps when they're not received in their communities, when there's not access to housing or jobs or resources.
Mm-hmm. So then, John, you are very involved in this space, and just the social justice space, have been for at least a decade. Why is it so hard to remove even a handful of these barriers?
Well, you've seen what's happened in the past few years, because we made a lot of progress, I think, over the past few years when it came to decarceration. Our incarceration rate actually went down recently. And then the pandemic comes along and you start to see crime go up a bit because of all the displacement and all the trauma caused by the pandemic. You saw an uptick in homelessness and all these various social conditions that got worse during the pandemic. And as soon as that happened, everyone went to, oh, we got to be tough on crime again. And so every time we make progress on these issues, if there's any kind of uptick in crime, it's a very fragile bit of progress, because everybody decides that the only way to keep people safe is to be as harsh as possible on people that commit crimes. And what ends up happening is they try to find every which way they can to be harsh on them. So not only do they want to increase the sentences or make bail reform get rolled back, but they also want to make it harder for them once they get out of prison, once they get out of jail, once they've already done paid their debt to society. They want to make it harder for them. But it's actually hustling backwards, because you think you're solving a problem, but you're actually making it worse by making legitimate participation in the economy and society more difficult for folks. You're making it more likely that they'll have recidivism.
Mm-hmm. And I want to talk. Oh, go ahead, Sheena. Go ahead.
Yeah, I want to say there are many problems happening across this country around the CJ system, but there are many promises as well. And I want to make sure I lift up some of those promises, like the Clean Slate Initiative. You know,
I was getting to that, but go ahead.
Okay. You know, we have been able to get a lot of bipartisan support on the policies that we've been passing. Has been a common sense policy that has not been polarized, because when you have 1 in 3 Americans who have an arrest or a record, it hits close to everybody's home. And so we've been able to pass Clean Slate. Our organization helped 6 states pass Clean Slate, but we have 10 states. California is one who I'm so proud of, has not gone into implementation yet, but has resulted in 3 million people getting their records cleared. And so we're really excited about where we're seeing people come together around humanity, around redemption, around forgiveness, and putting people over politics. And it is happening. You know, we don't get to lift those stories up as much, but it is some promise.
And is it okay, since we're here, is it bipartisan? Because when you know, well, where I live, Washington, it's always the dichotomy is Democrats really care about this and Republicans really don't. But on the ground, at the state level, is this something that Republicans and Democrats get together and they see that this is a common sense thing to do?
Yes. The thing is, we talk about it differently. Now, let me tell you, I am a person who will go into any room. I have been from CBAC to Congressional Black Caucus, and my message is the same, and that's why I'm comfortable going into those spaces and those rooms, because it is people over politics. And the thing is, we talk about it different. You know, sometimes maybe on the left, we're talking about the racial justice part about it. On the right, they may talk about how government don't need to be locking people up, or we're spending too much money trying to incarcerate people. I just think sometimes we're not at the tables together having these conversations. And when we do come together, we realize we're saying the same thing, we're just saying it differently.
And I worked with Sheena and her husband Desmond with the Florida Rights Restoration Coalition, and it was a bipartisan group that went through the state of Florida and convinced the state, the voters there. They had a 60% threshold for passing a new amendment to restore voting rights to folks with felony convictions, and it was a bipartisan effort in a state that's usually pretty evenly divided. We got well over 60% to approve this amendment in a referendum, and it was bipartisan. The team that was pushing for it was bipartisan, and the actual voters who supported it were bipartisan. And the thing is, Republicans have friends that have been locked up too. Democrats have them. I mean, the
Sometimes
Republican nominee for president is arrested right now. So everybody's knows somebody who's affected by this, and so I think all of us can realize that defining someone's life prospects and their opportunities by one mistake that they've made is really against the religious principles of redemption and grace and forgiveness. And I think America believes in second chances, and I think a lot of us, regardless of party, believe in that.
And so, Deepti, to pick up on what Sheena was talking about, and her excellent admonition that we talk about it differently at the state. So I'm wondering, when you are going to these companies and trying to get them to join up with Slack for Good in the work that you're doing, how do you talk to those companies? How hard is it to convince them that what you're doing is not only good for society, but also good for them.
Yeah, I think it is. It makes a lot of business sense. And I think what we have done is we've just showcased the talent. So we'll bring people in for interviews and get folks proximate, in the words of the great Brian Stevenson, to the talent, right? Most people in the tech sector have not or do not have a lot of exposure for people who have a record. And if you sit down next to somebody and you just see their sheer talent for coding, right? It's a no-brainer, right? We need engineers. These engineers are hardworking. These engineers are not necessarily going to throw a fit if the wrong flavor of kombucha is not in their refrigerator, right? And so you have people who will stay, they will work, they are smart. It makes business sense to hire from this population. And I think the results that we get for retention, for promotion, the business case gets easier and easier every single time we bring in a new company.
So now I'm going to put you on the spot a little
Sure.
bit. Again, how hard, I can't imagine that these meetings are easy. What kinds of skeptical questions do you get?
So I will say when I first proposed this idea, everybody said no. And it's mostly the general counsels who say no and the head of HR who say no, right? And so if you have, now we're at so many companies that most general counsels, if somebody's done it, it's a lot easier to say, well, look, PayPal's done it, Zoom has done it, Dropbox has done it, Slack has done it. Why aren't we doing it? And so I think it's a lot easier. The first couple were a little bit harder. So for Slack, for example, we took over 300 of our employees to prison to just show them this is our system. We can help. Look at the talent. So the first ones were pretty hard. But at this point, it's a no-brainer, right? And most of the general counsels talk. They say, hey, does this work at Slack? Do you have good results? Yes. Does it work here? You have good results? Yes. So now it's a lot easier.
Sheena.
I just want to say, if J.P. Morgan Chase can hire over 3,000 people who are formerly incarcerated or have an arrest or conviction, anyone in this room who's running a business can. And so, you know, I was just with them in New York giving them an award. I was at the Brennan Center, and they believe in second chances, and they kind of put their money where their mouth was. And they, you know, there's regulations with FDIC, I believe, but they found a way how they could still employ folks who have the skill set and they could bring in. And so I would say that it is a great business case. I mean, again, there's a population that is ready to work. You know, I hear people say, you know, we got to build back better, but we can't build back better when 70 million people can't get to work. And this is a workforce issue for a lot of states to get people back employed. And the barrier is that they have to check the box or they're not able to get hired.
You know, John, same question to you that I just asked Deepti, because you go into a lot of rooms. Like Sheena, you go into a lot of spaces. And maybe because you're John Legend, people will tell you what you want to hear. But talk about the skepticism you have encountered in talking about this issue, about Clean Slate, about all of the efforts involved in knocking down these barriers for second chances.
Honestly, I've seen skepticism, but I think because so many Americans know someone with a record, I feel very optimistic, and I share Deepti's optimism and Sheena's optimism, because I see that a lot of people want to do the right thing. I think in this environment, employers are looking for folks who are willing to work, and you know, because unemployment's so low right now, it's tough actually finding people, and so I think they're more open to the idea of going some non-traditional routes to hiring people. And again, when there's such a high volume of people with a record, it shows you that this is not, you know, this is not some outlier conversation where, you know, it's just a small percentage of the country. It's a large percentage of the country. And for us to survive as a country, for us to thrive as a country, we have to find work for folks that have a record. And integrate them back into our society, or we'll just have this huge population of people that are looking for work, a huge population that are not integrated in a way that is healthy and edifying for society.
Right, as Sheena said, 1 in 3 Americans.
Yes, that's a lot of folks.
It is a lot of folks.
And it's not one race, it's not one party, it's all of us.
It's everybody.
Yes.
So we've talked about the Clean Slate Initiative, we've talked about Slack for Good, but John, you also have, in addition to Human Level, which we talked about at the Washington Post, you have Free America.
Yes.
Talk about Free America and why you're addressing reentry.
Well, one of our biggest initiatives is called Unlocked Futures, and we did this in a partnership with Bank of America and with New Profit, which the idea behind Unlocked Futures is similar to what Sheena's doing, similar to what Deepti's doing, is finding ways to reintegrate folks back into their communities and giving them a chance to be leaders. So a lot of folks come out of prison and they have an idea, whether it's for a nonprofit or for a for-profit business. And we wanted to empower them to not only have a job for themselves, but to create jobs for others. And so Bank of America provided funding, New Profit provides their expertise and mentoring and connecting, convening ability. And we came together and have had multiple cohorts of nonprofit and for-profit business leaders who were formerly incarcerated and affected by our prison system, and giving them the opportunity to found their own businesses or to grow their businesses or their nonprofits with our support. So we've not only given them funding, but mentoring, bringing them together so they can learn from each other, and it's been very successful. And it shows once again that corporate America, Bank of America, big organizations are willing to put their money where their mouth is on some of these issues, and we appreciate it, and we think there should be more companies willing to do things like that.
That's a lovely segue.
Yeah.
Because this leads to a call to action. And I would love for each of you to address the people who are seated here right now, business leaders, some of whom they're sitting here and they're watching, but they might be like, yeah, that sounds nice, but I don't know. I don't know. Why should they, 1, be interested in this, and 2, actually get involved? Deepti, start with you.
Why should you do this? I think from a strictly business perspective, from a human perspective, it's the right thing to do. From a business perspective, employees are wanting to be engaged more. They want to feel like they're part of something bigger. My company creates workforce development software. That's great, it's wonderful. But it feels really good to work at part of a company that's trying to change the world and trying to change our country for the better. So in addition to there being business reasons, this is a great way to engage your employees and show you're trying to move a needle on a subject, to both John and Sheena's points, that really isn't political. This is redemption and this is second chances. And that's something that any of your employees would support and get behind.
Your company thrives when our economy and our community thrives. Our economy and our community can't thrive when we can't even help the weakest of our community. My husband, Desmond, always say, we're only strong as our weakest link. And so if you want your company to thrive, you have to make sure that we're making those investments and we're pushing our politicians to push out barriers that hold people back from thriving. We can't make our schools better if we don't have a good tax base there. And then, of course, the human dignity piece to it. Again, I would just challenge this room to think about all the second chances that you all have received, whether it was from your spouse, from a teacher, from your kids, even some of your business partners, and what that did for you, and what that felt like, and what that could do for our community. That's why I'm really excited about the Clean Slate Initiative. We're unlocking second chances for over 14 million people in the next 6 years, working across 50 states. And so, again, if you want your companies to thrive, our economy and our community has to thrive.
And it's a public safety issue, too. There's been a lot of conversation about safety lately. Like I said, crime went up during the pandemic, and a lot of people have kind of had a renewed vigilance on what it means to be safe in their community. But we're not safe when we leave so many people out of the economy, and when we leave so many people out of society. We're safer when they are included in society. They feel like they have a stake in society. And if we keep finding ways to reject them and push them away, they're not going away, literally. They're still here. And if they don't have a productive way to contribute, then they'll find unproductive ways to contribute. And so we believe it's a safety issue. If you reintegrate folks back into society, it makes us all safer. It gives them hope. It gives them opportunity. It gives them a sense of belonging. And it's better for everybody.
I'm going to ask this question. I'm hesitating because it's a delicate question. Because I could imagine that the folks who are sitting here, they've heard everything you just said to that last question. And there are some who might be wondering, I don't know, how do you screen? Do you screen folks at Slack for Good? Do you screen folks? Like, how are you finding the people who you're talking about to then send to these companies or their companies? Like I said, it's a delicate question, but I'm asking it because I just know, I feel it. I feel it.
I can talk about this to all the lawyers in the audience. You need to talk to your employee counsel, and you have to see what is the actual risk, right? If somebody bounced a check 15 years ago and they have a conviction, what is the actual risk of this person coming into your workplace and giving them a job? Probably nil. And I think if you look at the individual and really, I don't want to say quantify the risk, but really think about what is the risk, especially in an environment of remote work, it's almost always nil. So from that perspective it's not even just banning the bots, it's really think about what is the risk, and most of the problems will just go away.
Sheena?
Yeah, I mean, you said it well. I would tell folks, any business leader, you got to make business decisions. Like, of course you want to be thoughtful about different positions and stuff like that. I just gave an example of JP Morgan Chase. They're not allowing everyone to be in certain positions. They have to streamline. There's regulations that companies have to deal with and stuff like that. But look at your policies. Do you really have fair chance hiring policies? Are you excluding someone before you even make an assessment on their skill sets just by the box? And so these are one of the issues. Let me just to let folks just kind of give it more color. So my husband, I keep shouting him out. He's in the audience. Just got nominated for a Nobel Peace Prize. I want to put that out there as well.
Yes.
Yeah, he did.
But my husband and I, my husband has got all these accolades, author genius, now Nobel Peace Prize, Time 100, and yet we went to go apply for a rental place and got rejected. His conviction was over 15 years ago. And then for us to get into this home, we kept getting rejected because folks would just look at the box, they would not look at the person. They didn't look at all the contributions, the promises, the things that we have done in our community or for our country. They just saw the box and want to know, well, what happened? It didn't matter if it was an addiction issue or what happened 15 years ago. And so I just think people should give holistic view of where a person is now and not their past.
Yeah, I think Sheena is exactly right when you think about how tiny that box is, but how huge of a barrier it can be if you don't get to know the individual behind it. And I think we all need to, when we think about hiring, I have folks with criminal records who work on my touring team, and you get to know them as individuals. You decide that you can trust them. You decide that they deserve an opportunity to take care of their families and be good fathers and mothers. And you realize that box should not be the barrier between them and opportunity to improve their lives.
I want to close out by asking Sheena and John, from where we started, folks watched the trailer of Home Free. What do you want people to take away after they've watched it? And it's only 30 minutes, so it's a short but very powerful film.
I think, like I was just saying, get to know the human beings behind the facts and figures, behind the box, behind all of these kind of preconceived notions that you have. Get to know them. Get to know these human beings. That we wanted to tell their stories. We wanted them to have a chance to speak freely. So you got to put a human face in front of this issue that you may kind of think about more abstractly or more politically. Think about them as human beings. And once you see their humanity, I think it's pretty undeniable that they deserve a chance to be part of our society, participate fully, whether it's voting, housing, employment, getting involved in their kids' school, all of it. We want them to be part of our community and show some love and show some grace for them. And I think once you see them, you'll feel that.
And Sheena, you, as I mentioned before, you are in the documentary, or in the film. But there's you, Mr. Hinton, the coder, the
Marcus Bullock.
There's like there are 5 or 6. And to John's point, they run the rainbow of people in terms of age, sex, orientation, everything.
Yeah, I would say, when you look at the film, you're going to feel the pain, but you can see how they've transformed their pain into purpose. And I don't want y'all to stick with the pain. I want you to stick with the promise. I'm sitting up here as a CEO of a national organization. I heard someone say the other day, I don't run a nonprofit, I run a business with a tax exemption. I might have bounced an $87 check in 2004, but recently I collected a $75 million check at the TED conference for Audacious to scale our work. So there is promises in people that have made a mistake or had a blemished record. I want y'all to take away the promise that y'all see in those films. See that people are taking their pain, transforming it into purpose. And there's millions of people out there like that. That was just a snippet. And just really look at the human element of it. And again, I would just ask y'all to, support clean slate laws in your state. Y'all people of influence and power, you could do so much just in your own right to help support these legislations move forward. But I would say, just have a conversation. Have a conversation at your dinner table. That's where the real work happens.
And just think how much ingenuity and leadership and drive you'd be missing out on if you didn't let Sheena be Sheena. Like, if you didn't let Sheena be Sheena, like, how much you'd be missing out on because of one mistake in her past. Like, it'd be crazy.
Yeah.
Deep T, I'm gonna end on you because I keep coming back because I wrote it down. 100% success rate in terms of the people who have gone through Slack for Good, been placed, and they got full-time positions. At the end of this year, at the end of 2023, from your perspective, what would success look like?
This is a good one. Success for me would to keep the 100% success rate, double the number of companies, and double the number of apprentices, and keep that exponential growth going and going and going and going. Because that's where, there's no reason why we can't do that.
Deepti Rohatgi, Sheena Mead, John Legend.
Thank
you all
Jonathan.
very much
Thank you so
for
much.
this conversation.
We hope you enjoyed the discussion. Please make your way to the next session.